We're trying to be cooler, okay? Because I'm only one of the cool. Anyway, I'm trying to be cooler, so I've been trying to learn the lingo of the day. So, yep. And Ellie was saying no. I'm saying yes. Throwing shade. I've learned that one. Yes. Soon. Okay. Now, the one that I have particularly enjoyed getting to know is the struggle is real, right? And it's amazing what passes for a hashtag, the struggle is real these days. Actually, I want to show you. But first, let me just mention you some of the things that I've seen under the struggle is real. My iPhone 6 cord is no longer working. The struggle is real, right? Struggle! Chick-fil-A, where I wanted to go to lunch, is 2 miles away. The struggle is real. You know, no, that's not struggle at all, but that's like what we say. So I want to look at a few memes that I found on this topic. This is awesome. This girl's having a rough day. When they're out of pumpkin spice lattes, the struggle is real, people. This is real struggle. All right. Or check out how hard this guy's life is. Really hard. Have to work on a Saturday. The struggle is real. Man. Realer than most of the world. Okay, you got to work on that. Or the day just keeps getting worse because there's always something about bacon. You know, if there's no more bacon, like if bacon is not within 2 inches of us at all time as Americans, the struggle is real. And what I know it's legit. This is why I see these hashtags, because they're legit. And then I've seen this one where this girl is like sobbing and they come up with all these hilarious things. So this one I love. This girl's having a lot of problems. Received 30% off entire order with coupon code. Needed to add more items to receive free shipping. Like, oh, what am I going to do? I need more items to get the free shipping. All right, this one's really difficult here. I wanted to drive my new Corvette on my lunch break, but my favorite organic food restaurant is across the street. And she's having a hard trouble with spell check. So there's 2 things right there. The struggle is real. She can't even drive her. You can tell that they're kind of poking fun a little bit of this thing. And then this last one, I love this one too, because this is what some of our interns. I made so much money at my internship, I have to pay taxes. Guys, this is really, really difficult. My life is so hard. And then you have obnoxious people like this who just, when people say the struggles, that's actually me. Right there. And then the super, super intense people like this, you claim the struggle is real. Children dying from war and starvation determine that to be a lie. That's also me, actually, the intense one that's like, why are we hashtagging this, the struggle is real? Well, I looked this up to see what this means, because the coolest thing you can do about some sort of new thing people are saying is look it up and find the definition, right? So that's what I do. The struggle is real is an expression used to emphasize the gravity of a frustrating circumstance or hardship. Frustrating. Such struggle. Which is often ironically used similar to first world problems, right? So just substitute hashtag first world problems. Yes, sorry, this was the interwebs right here. I have no idea. I'm sure it was some urban, really funky, cool thing that I'm quoting from here, but that's kind of an idea. I looked it up to see when it came about. 5-6 years ago, people started using it. I saw some of the first memes. It was glorious, but I didn't think you guys would be interested. But emphasizing the gravity of a frustrating circumstance or hardship. The struggle is real. So there's a story about butterflies. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this before, about the idea of struggle and how butterflies emerge from the cocoon. So I'm just going to read this little story to you. I'm guessing this is probably fictitious, but it actually is scientific. I looked it up. And not every butterfly has this problem, but most of them, this is actually how they operate scientifically. So a man spent hours watching a butterfly struggling to emerge from its cocoon. It managed to make a small hole, but its body was too large to get through it. After a long struggle, it appeared to be exhausted and remained absolutely still. So the man decided to help the butterfly, and with a pair of scissors, he cut open the cocoon, thus releasing the butterfly. However, the butterfly's body was very small and wrinkled, and its wings were all crumpled. The man continued to watch, hoping that at any moment the butterfly would open its wings and fly away. Nothing happened. In fact, the butterfly spent the rest of its brief life dragging around its shrunken body and shriveled wings, incapable of flight. What the man, out of kindness and his eagerness to help, had failed to understand was that the tight cocoon and the efforts that the butterfly had to make in order to squeeze out of that tiny hole were nature's way of training the butterfly and of strengthening its wings. It's something about when it pushes through that tiny hole and has to struggle its way out, the blood is forced down to the end of the wings, and that's why they work. So if you've ever watched this thing happen, it takes hours for butterflies to work through it. And I watched the sped up version, of course. And as it emerges, it like the first few pumps, its wings are all like, and then the first few pumps, it starts to lift it up, and you can see the blood kind of starting to go out, and then it flies forever. But what this man did, of course, was rob that little butterfly of the struggle. And what happened was it was never able to fly. It died very quickly and had a miserable little life. So sometimes we think struggle is always bad. It's always meant for bad, and it's always going to bring bad things. And so the way we think, the way I naturally think, I think most of us, is avoid it at all costs. Struggle is so bad that I will count it as Starbucks running out of pumpkin spice syrup. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is my struggle today, and the struggle is so real. We don't like struggle, so we stay as far away from it as we can, but the Bible really doesn't talk about struggle in those terms at all. In Romans 5, 3-5, Paul is talking about the blessings of Christ in our lives and all that. And he says, not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who's been given to us. Now, hope is the last thing that sticks around, right? But the beginning of it, the way that we build all of those things, is through suffering. So I'm arguing tonight that the struggle is supposed to be real. And when it is real and we can embrace it, we can grow like that little butterfly. When we want someone to come along and cut that thing open for us and just help us avoid all of that struggle, we're actually robbing ourselves of an opportunity to grow. So I want to look at how we do that by looking at a couple of examples way, way back in the Old Testament. If we need to look at people who avoided struggle at all costs, it's really easy to go back and find this in the nation of Israel, okay? And the Old Testament is filled with opportunities that they had to lean into battle and struggle or to run away. So we're going to look at the very first time in the book of Numbers that they are offered this opportunity after the Exodus. So the nation of Israel, it wasn't really a nation at the time, but they were enslaved to Egypt for hundreds of years. And then we see Moses come along and lead them out, which is what the Exodus means. So he's just led them out. God has done all these miracles to get them out of Egypt and is going to lead them into the promised land. Okay, so this is exciting. This is what they've been praying for generations. Most people estimate 400 years. So think about how many generations they've been enslaved. These people don't even know what freedom is. Okay, so they're coming out, and this is where we see them in Numbers 13. They come to the edge of the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So think about the blessing that is, maybe to us that doesn't sound awesome, but to them that sounded awesome. Okay, because we have, all this other stuff now. Flowing with immediate lattes and any kind of variety of sushi you could ever want during the time of day. I mean, it was just a kind of place where you didn't really have to work that hard for stuff. They want to go see what this looks like. And so Moses calls the people together. Now, a lot of people estimate there are between 2 and 3 million people. Some estimate more. 2 to 3 million people in this nation at this point. They have 12 tribes, okay? The nation of Israel is broken into 12 tribes, which were Jacob's sons. Technically, Joseph became the 2 half-tribes of Manasseh and Ephraim. Joseph said, you know what, just give it to my sons. And so we see, if you notice that when you read it through the Old Testament, the half-tribe of Manasseh, the half-tribe of Ephraim, those are half-tribes of Joseph. You never see the tribe of Joseph in the Old Testament because he kind of gave that to his sons. So they bring together these tribes, and Moses, I don't know if he selects them or the people select them, but out of millions of people, 12 men are chosen. Think about that for just a second. Out of millions. Okay, this isn't like you got 30 people and like, half of you go over there, These are a lot of people. These folks are chosen. Now, I don't know what they were chosen based on, but they're leaders. In verse 3, we see they're tribal leaders of Israel, is how this one translation puts it. And Moses says, here's your task. Go scout it out. Go sneak in check out two things primarily. Do they have great defenses? What do they look like? What are we getting ourselves into? How are we going to fight this? And look at what the land is really like. Like, bring back samples of their fruit and their food. Let us see what it is we're getting into, because truly, when we can see what the promise is, it encourages us and it builds our faith, right? So come back and tell us a report on what this land, the land that God describes flowing with milk and honey, what does that look like? So they do, and they come back. And this is where we start in Numbers 13. After exploring the land for 40 days, the men returned to Moses, Aaron, and the whole community of Israel at Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran. They reported to the whole community what they had seen and showed them the fruit they had taken from the land. This was their report to Moses. We entered the land you sent us to explore, and it is indeed a bountiful country, a land flowing with milk and honey. Here's the kind of fruit it produces. They said just a few verses before this that they had to put a cluster of grapes on a massive log and carry it between two men because it was so huge. So they're like, this is the kind of fruit that's there. Good so far, right? But the people living there are powerful, and their towns are large and fortified. We even saw giants there. The descendants of Anak, the Amalekites live in the Negev, and the Hittites, the Jebusites, all the ites. The Canaanites live along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea and along the Jordan Valley. Now, they're not looking so faith-filled at this point. And I'm kind of turning around thinking, the top 12 leaders in this entire nation, you'd think they would be full of faith. I mean, why else did these people get chosen? You'd think they would be people who took responsibility for leading their nation, and yet they are full of doubt and fear. They had just seen God. These are the same people that had just seen God deliver the plagues upon Egypt, basically obliterate Pharaoh, and then split the Red Sea, a wall on each side, walk through the middle, the water come back down and kill all the Egyptians who were chasing them. These are the same people, and they're scared of giants. They're scared of people. They just saw God, and they're scared of people who are bigger than them. Think about that. That's crazy. And you know what the funny thing is? We don't even see a giant. For hundreds of years, we don't see a single time when an Israelite has to fight a giant until David and Goliath, which is literally hundreds of years later. And this is what these people are afraid of. Struggle will bring out fear or faith. That's one of the things struggle will do for us. It will show us what's underneath. Do we believe, or are there those fears hiding right underneath the surface that as soon as they're going, bing, they come up? Let's keep going. There are some people who can exhibit faith, and this is what we see here in this next part. But Caleb, and Caleb was the leader from the tribe of Judah, tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. Let's go at once to take the land, he said. We can certainly conquer it. But the other men who had explored the land with him disagreed. We can't go up against them. They're stronger than we are. So they spread this bad report about the land among the Israelites. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw were huge. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them, we felt like grasshoppers, and that's what they thought too. So this is pretty bad. The leaders are freaking out, okay? But now let's look what happens next, which is usually what happens when leaders freak out. Then the whole community began weeping aloud, and they cried all night. Their voices rose in a great chorus of protest against Moses and Aaron. Remember the people that had just led them out of slavery. If we had only died in Egypt, or even here in the wilderness, they complained. Why is the Lord taking us to this country only to have us die in battle? Our wives and our little ones will be carried off as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt? The struggle is so real. Then they plotted among themselves, let's choose a new leader and go back to Egypt. They're seriously going to kick out Moses. Then Moses and Aaron fell face down on the ground before the whole community of Israel. Two of the men who had explored the land, Joshua son of Nun, who was the leader of Ephraim, the tribe, half tribe, and Caleb, tore their clothing, which was a symbol of mourning. They said to all the people of Israel, the land we traveled through and explored is a wonderful land, and if the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us safely into that land and give it to us. It is a rich land flowing with milk and honey. Do not rebel against the Lord, and don't be afraid of the people of the land. They are only helpless prey to us. They have no protection. Think about this covenant language. They have no protection, but the Lord is with us. Don't be afraid of them. And all the people respond very, very well. The next verse says they try to stone Joshua and Caleb for speaking this way. How dare you speak with faith, declaring the things God has already told us through a burning bush that did not burn. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not just like, I kind of had this inkling God may have said this to me. It's like, this is so obviously clear. He's spoken this, and all they're doing is reminding the people of what God has already promised them, and they want to stone them for faith. This is another thing. Struggle will bring out bitterness or gratitude. Bitterness. Think about this bitterness. We want to get rid of you, and we want to stone you. We're going to go find somebody else who agrees with us because, oh, poor us. We've only been delivered and been shown. We're one of the greatest stories God will ever use. And for multiple thousands of years, people will be reading about how God just delivered us from these people. But, we have to go fight. I don't know if you have ever allowed yourself to just start feeling really sorry for yourself in the midst of struggle. I most certainly have. Boo. What is it we watched in that invitation and challenge video? Boo frickin' who? Zeke Braverman, one of my favorite people to quote of all time. You know, you start to think like, oh my goodness, this struggle is not even real. Okay? Like, my struggle is not even real. Some people's are. I would say theirs was pretty real. Okay? Right? They're going to have to go fight a bunch of people, a bunch of really big, nasty people. They are the aggressors, you know, so they're trying to get people out of a land they've been in for a long time. That's a struggle. That struggle is real. But it was supposed to be real. Think for just a second. There are all sorts of stories in the Old Testament of how God came in and just defeated an army with no effort whatsoever from his people. I mean, I'm thinking of one right now. They come in and they're like, everybody's dead. Plunder. You know what I'm saying? Like, cool. We just got here and God just killed them all. I guess God could have done that. Right? He chose for them to have to go to battle, to build their faith in him. It wasn't looking so good at this point. And here are some of the consequences, all right? They refused to go to war. Here are some consequences. 10 leaders die on the spot. Bam! Plague. The 12 minus Caleb and Joshua are just gone. Which probably should give us the indication that leaders who led us astray, a bunch of people, might be punished slightly more harshly. The next thing is millions of Israelites get what they asked for. You know what they wanted? A life without struggle. You know what they got? 40 years of wandering around with nothing. 40 years of boredom. They didn't struggle, did they? I bet you somewhere along the way they were like, please, for the love, can I just go fight somebody? Like, give me something to do. We're just wandering around. I mean, pure boredom for 40 years. It is horrible to read through that story. They get what they asked for, which is, I don't want to fight. I don't want struggle. And so God says, fine. What you're looking at right now, that promised land that I promised you, turn around, head the other way for 40 years. You don't have to struggle if you don't want to, but your life's going to look really awful. And the third thing is that the descendants have to wait for their promise. You know, the children of these people, because, I mean, the idea was above a certain age, everybody was going to die. Now, God didn't kill them all because, you know, children need parents and, you know, they're trying to raise people up, blah, blah, blah. But they were going to die in the wilderness. He said, all of you will die before you get to see the promised land. In the next 40 years, you're going to all die. Their children should have been raised in the land flowing with milk and honey. They should have had stories of seeing God come through in battle after battle after battle. Instead, they get to wander around in the desert, pure bored, with their parents for 40 years. I mean, they have not only ruined their lives, they have just ruined the next generation, what God had planned for them because of their disobedience. Now, those are pretty steep consequences. I don't think I want to see things like that in my life because I refuse to fight the battles God puts in front of me. Right? I don't want to miss out on something. If God has struggle and I say, no, let me lead a boring life. I just want to be comfy. here I'm comfortable and I'm safe and I'll just sit here in the corner and nothing will ever happen to me. But, I mean, we've got to kind of be careful what we ask for, right? And what does the next generation of disciples get out of that either? The struggle is supposed to be real. That's how we designed it. Let's just look at another time, because Israel they do kind of redeem themselves, which is very rare. So it's nice to point out when we actually find an example. In Numbers 32, and this is after they've wandered around for 40 years, they've come back to the Jordan River. They're on the east side, looking over to the west side, which is the promised land, the land of Canaan. Moses is super irritable by this point. He is done with these people. I don't know how many times you can read. He's like, and because of you guys, I don't get to go. I mean, it's hilarious. He's really pretty bitter. But that's God too. It was his own disobedience. He doesn't get to go to the promised land. God has already told him Joshua is going to be the one to lead him in. You need to raise them up. And so Deuteronomy is basically the longest sermon anybody's ever preached, where he's standing there telling them or recounting to them, maybe over months, I don't know, all the stuff that's happened in the other 4 books already. You know, it's happened this way. And he's like, remember all this stuff. Well, as they're standing on the east side of the Jordan River, 2.5 tribes look around and they're like, hold on a second. We could stay here. The Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half tribe of Manasseh. They look around and they say, this is actually really good for our herds. They have huge, expansive herds. This chapter tells us. And look, we don't really need to go to the other side of the Jordan. We could stay here and have what we need. Now that was not the promised land that God was trying to lead them into. That was the east side of the Jordan River. They're supposed to go to the other. And Moses rips them a new one. Okay? He is ticked. He's like, are you kidding me? 40 years and you've all watched your parents die for this kind of lack of faith. God said you're supposed to go there, and you're again refusing to fight. I mean, he is just like, God's going to judge you. He's like, oh, you people drive me crazy. Like, I can't believe you're going to do the same thing they did. But it was a little different, because Numbers 32, we see, it says, they approached Moses and said, we simply want to build pens for our livestock and fortified towns for our wives and children. Then we will arm ourselves and lead our fellow Israelites into battle until we have brought them safely to their land. Meanwhile, our families will stay in the fortified towns that we build here, so they will be safe from any attacks by the local people. We will not return to our homes until all the people of Israel have received their portions of land. But we do not claim any of the land on the other side of the Jordan. We would rather live here on the east side and accept this as our grant of land. And he's like, oh, really? Okay, cool. So you're going to go fight, even though you have your land here, and even though there's really nothing for you to gain, you're going to go fight this fight with your brothers so they can get their land. Sweet. It was like, oh, maybe I should have asked before I went off on a vent rage. So that's what they do. Joshua 22 tells us they stood by their word. They built up towns there so that their people would be safe. They went off and they fought for a long time. I'm not exactly sure how long it took them to come into the land, but a long time from what we see, all these battles. They stayed with their brothers until they had conquered all of that land, and then they went back home. Which is pretty amazing if you think about it, because they're actually kind of fighting someone else's battle with them, right? When they kind of really didn't have to. So the struggle is supposed to be real. How do we lean into it? Now, obviously I'm not talking about real battle, right? I doubt that needs to be said. But I'll say it anyway, because really what I'm talking about here is spiritual battle, spiritual struggle. You know, our war is not against flesh and blood. We know this, right? It's not against people of any kind, really. But we are in a spiritual battle all the time. And God leads us through these seasons of what we call breakthrough and blessing. So for the people of Israel, they were probably like, seriously? I've been enslaved my whole life. And now you want me to go fight people like giants? But actually we see, after they came out of Egypt, they had a time of rest. Before they came to that side of the Jordan, and Moses like, all right, let's go see what we're going to do now. They had a time of rest. We call that a time of blessing. So they had the breakthrough, which is hard work. It's kind of like kingdom and covenant, right? We break through something, and then he gives us a season of rest, and he lets us kind of lean into it, enjoy it, eat the fruit, hang out, tell the stories, and then he says, more to be conquered. Get moving. Now, where we have trouble is if we just want to go from battle to battle to battle and never rest, or when we want to stay where the comfortable place is after we've broken through and don't want to get back up and fight anymore. and that was their problem, right? Somehow they felt entitled, and this is where I think the bitterness came out several times. It's not the only time we see them say, let's just go back to Egypt. Egypt was so much better. Bitterness had creeped in at some point into their lives, that God had left them there. And so at the moment they get the opportunity to hate him for something, they do. Because they felt entitled to not have to have that life. Because the struggle, why should we struggle for the people of God? But the struggle is supposed to be there, and it's supposed to be real. So for us, sometimes we think, you know what, I just came through something really hard. I'm just going to rest. Cool. God almost always does that for us, even when we don't realize it. He often takes us through something and then just gives us a good span of time. If we look back over the patterns of our spiritual lives, we will see that often, again and again. You just had something really great and you get to rest. And then something will come right up. I just spoke to someone a few weeks ago who was like, man, I got rebaptized. God is doing all this in me. And then all of a sudden, the next 3 weeks were really bad. I'm like, struggle is real. It's supposed to be. That's a struggle. It's a war. We're in the middle of a war. Now, we don't think that. We think we get up and run, get our exercise in at the first of the day, go to work, go home and, maybe do something fun or watch some show or walk our dog. That's life, right? We forget that we're actually in the middle of spiritual battle all the time, like every second, every day. There is struggle, and it's supposed to be there. It's supposed to be real, and sometimes it's supposed to be hard. And we want someone to come along and snip that cocoon for us so that we can just get out fast, because this is really hard. And why am I trying to squeeze through this thing? This is not okay. I bet you every butterfly that's ever come out of a cocoon was like, seriously? It just takes a long time. You can't rush it, right? The struggle's supposed to be real. That's how he made us. So, how do we cultivate courage in the midst of battle? The first thing is surround yourself with truth. Truth. We need faith talk. And that usually means remembering who God is. And how do we know what God has said about himself? There's a lot of it in the Bible. There's a lot of it that he says to us if we listen, right? A.W. Tozer said, we do God more honor by believing what he has said about himself and having the courage to come boldly to the throne of grace than by hiding in self-conscious humility among the trees of the garden. We do him more honor by actually choosing to believe what he said about himself. But we have to know what he said about himself, which means abiding. Because if we jump off to another battle without remembering who he is and how big he is, we're going to find ourselves saying pathetic things like, but they're really big people. They're bigger than us. God just defeated an entire nation and killed hundreds of I don't know how many Egyptians were after them, but after 2 to 3 million people, a couple, right? He just killed all these people, but oh man, they're really big people. They're bigger than us. What are we going to do? They have completely forgotten who God is. In that months of time. Now, other nations hadn't. They had heard rumors of this God. When they go and try to fight people, they're like, uh-oh, you guys are those people. It's almost like the other people understand who God is better than they do. They have forgotten. Sometimes we do this by hearing God's words directly for ourselves. And Joshua experienced this in Joshua 1. I love this. God's language to Joshua. Be strong, be courageous, have faith in yourself. I have faith in you. I bolded all the places that I felt like were like strong covenant language. After the death of Moses, the Lord's servant. Now think about big shoes to fill as a leader. The Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant. He was Moses' assistant. He said, Moses, my servant, is dead. Therefore, the time has come for you to lead these people. Imagine how much pleasure he must have gotten out of that. I just watched this basically kill Moses, leading these people. Oh, goody, it's my turn. The Israelites across the Jordan River into the land I'm giving them. I promise you what I promised Moses. Wherever you set foot, you will be on land I've given you, from the Negev wilderness in the south to the Lebanon mountains in the north, from the Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west, including all the land of the Hittites. No one will be able to stand against you as long as you live, for I will be with you as I was with Moses. I will not fail you or abandon you. Understand how that must have felt to Joshua. You're going to be with me the same way you were with Moses. And it's amazing. The first miracle, right after Joshua is installed, God kind of splits the Jordan River, but it's different. With the Red Sea, it says it went up on each side as like a wall on either side, and they walked through. But with the Jordan, it says he just stopped the flow of water. It must have been some sort of wall because the water's still coming, right? And it stopped flowing down, and so they just walked across on that. It's different, but it's pretty similar, right? You never see another time when a massive body of water like this is split in the middle ever again in Israel's history. And yet here it happens, right? You know why? For God to be like, see, I am with you. I believe in you. I'm going to do a miracle kind of like the one I did through Moses so you can have courage and confidence. He says, be strong and courageous, for you are the one who will lead these people to possess all the land I swore to their ancestors I would give them. Think about how he must have felt receiving this language. Faith, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, turning either to the right or to the left. Then you will be successful in everything you do. Study this book of instruction continually. Meditate on it day and night so you'll be sure to obey everything written in it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. He doesn't mind challenging him. Right? You got to obey to get these blessings. But this is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord is with you. That is covenant language. The Lord is with you wherever you go. We also need to be reminded of God's promises through others. In his sermon, Moses says this in Deuteronomy 20. He says, when you go to war against your enemy and see horses and chariots and soldiers far outnumbering you, the battle, the struggle, the fear, right? Do not recoil in fear of them. God, your God, who brought you out of Egypt, is with you. When the battle is about to begin, let the priest come forward and speak to the troops. He'll say, attention, Israel. In a few minutes, you're going to do battle with your enemies. Don't waver in resolve. Don't fear. Don't hesitate. Don't panic. God, your God, is right there with you, fighting with you against your enemies, fighting to win. Faith talk from somebody else. That's cool. Like we might all know this, but here's somebody who's been spending time with the Lord, who's going to come out and say to you the things you might have forgotten by looking over at the enemy, which is, imagine, you're going into a battle, spiritual battle. You're tired, you're afraid, and someone comes along and says, don't waver in resolve. Don't fear. Don't hesitate. Don't panic. God is with you. He's going to fight with you. He's going to be down in the trenches with you, doing the work in the middle of this battle. That's good. We need to hear God's words when we're to actually activate courage in the middle of battle. This is up and in, right? The second way to cultivate courage in the midst of battle is to surrender yourself to him regardless of the results. Now here's the problem we get ourselves into when our eyes are on what's going to be the ending of this. We make it about us. Now the battle is about, well, hold on a second. If I'm going to go to battle, you're going to win this, right? We're all going to come out okay? Just want to make sure before I sign up. Like, I'm not sure how many soldiers would have ever enlisted for battle ever in any nation's history if that was the prerequisite. Can you guarantee me we're going to win? And can you guarantee me we're going to win the battles that I'm in? Because the thing is, we forget there's an entire battlefield that God can see, and we can see like 10 feet, right? We think our little battle is all of it. And he knows all of it. Daniel 3 tells us a story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or Rakshak and Benny, if you like VeggieTales. They refused to bow down to this massive statue. They refused to worship, basically, something other than God, someone other than God. And King Nebuchadnezzar threatens to throw them into the fiery furnace, right? And this is how they respond. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered King Nebuchadnezzar, your threat means nothing to us. If you throw us in the fire, the God we serve can rescue us from your roaring furnace and anything else you might cook up, O king. But even if he doesn't, it wouldn't make a bit of difference. We still wouldn't serve your gods or worship the gold statue you set up. Now, he does choose to save them miraculously. It's a really cool story. But what if he hadn't? And what if the prerequisite were, Oh, he's totally going to get us out of this. He's going to rescue me from this battle. We're not going to die. I mean, you never see that from them. They're like, we might. That happens, right? Toss somebody in a fiery furnace, sometimes they don't come out. Now, if God chooses to rescue us, he can. And he did. I mean, they're standing and they're walking around with an angel. Many people believe Christophany, which is an appearance of Christ. They're walking around, now 4 of them, in a fiery furnace, and even the guards that threw them in die because of the heat. That's a miracle. God chose to glorify himself, and out of that, lots of cool stuff happened. But he doesn't always choose to do that. And I kind of get the impression from even the statement they're making here, that if he had chosen not to, they'd have been totally okay. Their enlisting in the battle was not dependent on them knowing that the results were in their favor. When we think, okay, God, I will dive into this life with you if you give me a spouse, because I really want that. Or if you give me the job I need to advance my career, because I know you want that for me. Or if you give me healing for this thing that's been pain all my life. That's really not what fighting in a battle is about. It's about doing our part in a cause that we believe in, period. And we don't always get to see what the results of those will be. Another Tozer quote. He says, sometimes I go to God and say, God, if thou, he prayed in King James Version, obviously. God, if thou dost never answer another prayer while I live on this earth, I will still worship thee as long as I live and in the ages to come for what thou hast done already. To live in such a way that would say, I can't even begin to imagine all the things you've done for me before. You really don't have to do another thing for me the rest of my life. And I would still worship you for eternity for what you've already done. You don't owe me anything. He didn't owe Israel anything. He wanted to lead them into a land flowing with milk and honey. You know what? Some of them might have died. But they as a whole, as a people, came into their inheritance. That was the point. In Numbers 14:24, he says this, but my servant Caleb has a different attitude than the others have. He has remained loyal to me, and so I will bring him into the land he explored. His descendants will possess their full share of that land. Think about it this way. This struck me. I see it as, whoa, that's scary. I don't want to go. God sees it as loyalty or disloyalty. Think about that for a second. Because if I really knew him and trusted him, I would go. He's remained loyal to me. Think about the way he puts that. Not he had great faith and believed. He's loyal to know who I am and to believe it when nobody else will. The third way to cultivate courage in the midst of battle, just do it. Just go out and fight. Probably going to lose some. Might get a little wounded. Battle. Guarantee you in every war, in every battle that's ever been fought, there are those soldiers who don't feel ready, who feel like they need more training, who want to be shown another time, who are not sure they're going to remember all the instructions, and yet somebody goes, bink, go fight. And they may die. And they may die because they weren't completely ready. The point is the war. That's the point. God is going to win the war. I'm not sure how many battles of mine he's actually going to, let me come through unscathed on. He might let me be like Abednego and be like, sweet. Or many, many, many martyrs throughout time. I just read about one that the missionary that we support in India posted a few days ago of an evangelical pastor in India by some radical group to see the picture of this man, I kind of wish he had said sensitive material. He was slashed up everywhere on his body, killed he was accused of working with someone else. That's battle. He's in the middle of battle. And not everybody comes out okay. Some of those people, that's the reason we have the word martyr, someone who's died for their faith, right? I'm not being killed for my faith. At least not today. But the struggle is there, right? It's supposed to be there. William Shedd said, a ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what ships are for. Right? In 2 Timothy 2, Paul is talking about athletes, farmers, and soldiers. And he says, endure suffering along with me as a good soldier of Christ Jesus. Soldiers don't get tied up in the affairs of civilian life, for then they cannot please the officer who enlisted them. You know, I've never actually been in battle, so I can't say this firsthand. I've just watched movies. But, you know, Braveheart's one. There's a bunch, right? And I've never noticed that anybody cares that much in the middle of a battle how their hair looks. Ever noticed that? Nobody's like, oh man, do I look okay? Did I wear the right thing for battle? Like man, I kind of wish I'd had this for breakfast instead of that. What was I thinking? Will I ever get that opportunity again to try that? They're in the middle of battle. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't care. This is life or death. To get tied up in the affairs of civilian life, that's what people do when they don't realize they're in battle. Right? All this stuff is so important. Guess what? It's not important. I'm not very good at this yet, but I keep trying to remind myself. I'm not to the point yet where I can say, if it's not going to matter in eternity, it shouldn't matter today. I'm not quite there yet. But I have been trying to work on, if it's not going to matter in eternity, it probably shouldn't overwhelm my life. It probably shouldn't ruin my day. It probably shouldn't be something I can get hung up on and bitter about. Because one day I'm going to be in eternity thinking, why did I care? I somehow forgot that I was in the midst of battle, and instead of drawing upon every resource I could have to fight this battle, I was worried about that. Samuel Smiles said, the battle of life is, in most cases, fought uphill, and to win it without struggle, or perhaps to win it without honor. If there were no difficulties, there would be no success. If there were nothing to struggle for, there could be nothing to be achieved. Paul is a really good example of this. He has in 2 Corinthians 12, what he calls the thorn in his flesh. And we don't know what it is, but some sort of struggle that he had throughout his entire life. And he says this, 3 times I begged the Lord to take it away. Now you'd think the Lord would do that because Paul was very, very faithful, was martyred, was beaten, was shipwrecked, was everything you can think of, kicked out of his family, kicked out of his town, kicked out of his synagogue, tortured in various ways. I mean, if anybody had earned it, it would be Paul. But that's not the point, right? We don't earn these things. God gives us what he knows we need. Each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I'm glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses, as in the insults, hardships, persecutions, and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I'm weak, then I'm strong. So why don't you just close your eyes for a moment. We're going to go into prayer in a few minutes. I want you to just think for a second, what are the battles? What are the struggles right now in my life? Where are those giants? If I think about them in relation to God, it seems a little silly, but yet that is my struggle. And it's hard sometimes to look over the top of them and see God. Is there a thorn in my flesh like Paul had that I cannot seem to overcome? And every time I come back to it, I feel like a failure. Because if I were really spiritual and if I were really mature, that thing would be gone. I want you to just get it in your head. Ask the Lord. There's someone I respect a lot who operates in what we call the naturally supernatural a lot. And this is what he says. He says, I don't really understand why people crucify people when they're prayed for healing, for physical healing, and they don't get healed. And people say, oh, you didn't have enough faith, whatever. He says, the way I see it is we're in the midst of war. And this person has become in some small way a casualty. They are hurting. And so I say, good for you. You're still going. It's not your fault. If anybody could have seen it that way, it would have been Paul. Sometimes we have struggles out there because God wants us to be weak and let him be strong. Where our action comes in is getting up and moving. Not backing down, not being afraid because we know he's the one fighting for us. We're not trying to do it on our own. We're not trying to get up and be stronger and bigger and better. We're trying to retreat into him and let him fight for us. But to do it in the grandest way that he leads us to so that he can receive glory. Lord, whatever those things are in our lives, wherever those battles are, for some of us, they're like real situations, or they're people who seem to be in the way. For some of us, they're attitudes or they're sin struggles. There are just blocks. Sometimes it's shadows to our strengths, in fact. Just those things that we can't seem to overcome or we can't seem to see redeemed, those battles. And sometimes it's just easier to sit down and just not go there. Can I just rest longer? Can I just sit longer? I'm safe here. I'm happy here. I feel good. And sometimes that's where you're calling us, but often you're calling us to move. And whichever ones of us there are tonight, where you're saying, get up and move. See this thing conquered in your life. Overcome this. Trust me that I'm bigger, that I'm more powerful. Remember who I am. I'm God, and I can do anything. And even in those areas that seem hopeless, I can overcome. I can conquer. I can do the work. Tonight, Lord, we are asking you to build our faith in you and to remind us that we're people that you called to you. We're people that you called to follow you. And as we follow our rabbi, we can be like you. And so if you're stepping out on water, we can sit in the boat or we can get out and walk on water. I pray that all of us in this room would be determined to walk on water. Even if we end up sinking, we can still say, Peter can still say, he was the only one who got out of the boat. Even in the midst of failure, even when going into battle might mean that sometimes we get hurt. You're there for us, and you're more important than all of it. And I have a feeling it's not going to matter to us that much anyway. So, Lord, if there's anything that we need to submit to you, if there are cares of the world that we've just gotten distracted by, if we're just so engrossed in what's going on in our world around us, with what we can see with our eyes, that we've forgotten, give us eyes to see spiritually what you're doing. Is there someone in our life who really needs us to fight for them? Is there somebody that we need to stand up and give the gospel to? Is there somebody we need to pray for? Is there something in our lives that we need to see overcome? Wherever it is, Lord, do those things in us tonight. We reach out to you and ask you to help us because we don't really know how to fight battles. We're afraid of struggle. Struggle's awful. You're the one who can bring us through it with grace, with so much power that we may look back and not even realize we just came through one. Help us overcome. Tonight as we go into prayer, I'm just going to put up Ephesians 6, and I just want to read this because this might be, for those of you who want to reflect a little bit, this might be a good place to start. This is the armor of God. And so the second slide I'll just keep up so you can kind of look at it and ask yourself as we're going through this if there's something that you're missing. Because even though he's asking us to go out in battle, he's not telling us to go in our jeans and t-shirt, right? A final word, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on all of God's armor so that you will be able to stand firm against all the strategies of the devil. For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. Therefore, put on every piece of God's armor so that you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. Then after the battle, you will be standing firm. Stand your ground, putting on the belt of truth and the body armor or breastplate of God's righteousness. For shoes, put on the peace that comes from the good news, the peace that comes from knowing we're in covenant with him, so that you will be fully prepared. In addition to all of these, hold up the shield of faith to stop the fiery arrows of the devil. Put on salvation as your helmet and take the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Salvation as our helmet. The sword of the Spirit, the word of God, a breastplate of righteousness, the peace of the gospel, the belt of truth. So tonight as we're praying, we're putting on faith songs tonight. This is not what we normally do. We usually do something slow and reflective and sitting with the Lord, whatever. But tonight, I just want to build your faith. If you want to sit in some corner of the room, if you want to go to somebody and ask for prayer, and you say, hey, I need you to remind me who I am and who God is again, I've forgotten. I can't get through this battle thinking the way I do right now. If you want to sit, if you want to pace, if you want to jump, if you want to whatever, we're going to turn the lights down. We're going to put some music on. And I want to encourage you as we leave this up to just ask God, is there some part of this armor that I am missing that I need you to replace, that I need to be very aware of so that I don't go out in this battle and get slaughtered when I wasn't supposed to? Okay?